Resourceful Designer, episode 120, Discovery Process, Doing It Right.
Welcome to the Resourceful Designer podcast, offering solutions to streamline your graphic and web design business so you can get back to designing. And now, your host, he thinks white socks go with everything, Mark Dickout.
Welcome to the show. Thank you so much for plugging me in your ears and listening to little old me discuss running a graphic design business. I do appreciate you tuning in. It's been a very good week for me. I finished 2 logo designs for clients. Both of them very happy with what I provided. One of them I'm going to be doing some other materials now with that logo. The other one was just a logo. That's all she needs for now, but who knows what'll happen in the future. And the client that I told you about last week, which is one of my oldest clients that I thought I had lost because normally I would start working long before now on some project that I do for them every year. Well, they finally got back to me and said that, yes, I am going to be doing some work for them, but it'll be at a much smaller scale. Their budget, they didn't go into details, but they just said they have a much smaller advertising budget this year than they have in the past. So the role that I play in it is going to be much smaller, but at least they are still on board as a client. So maybe won't be as much money that I'll be earning, but it's still, they're great people to work with. So I'm looking forward to that. Now, I'm very happy to share this week's resource of the week with you. And that is that Resourceful Designer has its very own iOS app and Android app, as well as in the Amazon App Store. Now, what does this mean to you? Well, probably not too much for you if you're already listening on some sort of podcast platform or on iHeartRadio or on Spotify or Google Play Music. You could continue going the way you are. But what this app will do is it opens it up so that people that aren't familiar with podcasts or people that don't normally listen to podcasts will have an avenue to listen to Resourceful Designer. So if you have any design friends or any colleagues or anybody that you've said before that, hey, you should listen to Resourceful Designer, and they said, well, I don't listen to podcasts, or I don't understand podcasts, or I don't know how to listen to a podcast, I guarantee they know how to install an app on their phone. So you can tell them to go to the Apple App Store or go to the Android market or whatever it's called, Google App Store or the Amazon App Store, and just search for Resourceful Designer and download the app. Now, what the app does is it's just all the episodes are available in there. Now, one interesting feature that I really like is you can star or favorite an episode. So if there's an episode that you really liked, you can put a star next to it, and then you can have a special menu that'll only show you those episodes. So if there's certain ones that you think, oh, I might want to listen to this again in the future for some reason, maybe it's something you're not there yet, and you know that it's important information you want to get to, you can put a star next to it. And as I said, you go through your favorites menu, and it'll show all the episodes that you've put a star next to. And you can even do this without having them on your phone or your device. Like, you don't have to download the episode, but you can still favorite them, and it'll show up in the list. And then whenever you want to listen to it, you just click and you can re-download or stream it and listen to it that way. So I'm really excited about this. I've downloaded the app on my iPhone. I don't have an Android phone to test it out, but if you have an Android phone and you want to test it out and let me know what the experience is like, please do so, and then send me an email at feedback@resourcefuldesigner.com. And one more feature I want to share, if I don't know on the Android, but I know on the iOS app, if you have the app open and you rotate your phone in landscape mode while it's playing, it goes into CarPlay mode, which creates a big button display to makes it really easy if you're in your car to control the podcast. So I thought that was a pretty cool feature. Now, I did not design the app myself. My company that I host with, Libsyn, I had them do it. So I provided them with a couple of images, but it's all them. So don't look at the app and say, oh, Mark's designing apps now. No, I don't design apps. But that's this week's resource of the week. Please share it with your fellow designers, your colleagues, your friends, anybody that you think could benefit from the podcast. It makes it so much easier now. Instead of telling them, oh, you can listen to the podcast here or there, just tell them to go to the App Store and download Resourceful Designer. And now, discovery process, doing it right. The discovery process is, it's kind of like dating, or, well, at least what I remember dating being like. I've been married for going on 24 years now, so it's been a while since I've dated, but that's what I imagine the discovery process is like. I mean, it's done at a point in your client relationship when you want to get to know your client better. What are their goals? What makes them feel good? What frustrates them? What do they like? What don't they like? Why is it that they want to work with you? It's all similar things that you would ask whenever you were dating somebody. And this conversation that you're going to have, this discovery conversation, it reveals all the thoughts and the feelings your client has towards their business, towards their product, or towards their service. Now, larger agencies, they have people who do this sort of thing. It's their responsibility to do the discovery process. They're the ones that meet with clients. They're the ones that define the strategies and figure out the goals of those clients. And then they create a creative brief or a project plan that they then hand out to a design department. And the designer in the design department, all they have to do is follow the brief and start designing. And that's great. But as a freelance or as a home-based designer, you don't have that luxury. Yes, some clients may give you a design brief, but can you really trust it? Do you know that it's exactly what you need in order to create the best designs for your clients? Probably no. So when it comes to the discovery process, you're pretty well on your own for the whole thing, from discovery all the way through the design. But what exactly is the discovery process? Well, a discovery process can be described as a fact-finding mission. It's a way to learn more about your clients, to learn what they expect from hiring you for their design project. Discovery should be the cornerstone of every new relationship you have with a client and every new design project you do for those clients as well. Because it not only helps you learn what you need to know before starting a design project, but it's also so important to help build relationships with your clients. And if you've listened to this podcast before, you know the importance I put on building those relationships with your clients. Well, that's what discovery does. It helps you build those relationships because you get to know them. Think of dating. You're getting to know your clients. And while you're going through this discovery process, you'll learn your clients' needs, you'll learn their challenges, and you'll also learn the results they're expecting from you, the designer. Now, discovery should be a two-way streak. Not only will you learn what you need to know about your clients and their projects, but your clients will learn about you as well. They'll learn how you work, they'll learn your thought process, how you tackle a problem, and so on. But more importantly, this back and forth conversation, they'll learn things about themselves that they may not have thought of before. Now, all of this is vastly important because to design without a proper focus, without going through this discovery, is a waste of time. In last week's episode 119, being effective versus being productive, I talked about what happens when you can be very productive, but if you're not going in the right direction, you're not being very effective. Well, that's what the discovery process does. It makes you effective. When it comes to any design project, whether it's the smallest thing that you're doing, a business card, to a huge marketing campaign, the designing part of it is always the last step, or at least one of the last steps of the process. Because, well, as you know, design is there to solve a problem. That's what we do as designers. We're problem solvers. And if you don't know for sure what the problem is that you're facing, how are you supposed to create a design that solves that problem? And before you can define the problem that your design needs to solve, you need to go through this discovery process. Does that make sense? You need to go through a process that takes into account things like analytics, brand standards, if your client actually has them, goals for your particular project you're working on, and many other things. All of this to figure out what direction your creativity will take when it finally comes time to design. Plus, keep in mind that while you are taking all those required steps during your discovery process to find the right solution to your particular given problem, you may also be triggering additional insights or possibly even more questions about that problem that might lead you in a whole new direction. And that's why the discovery process is so important. So now I want to share with you 4 steps in the discovery process. Step number 1 is define your client's goals. The first step in the discovery process is to determine exactly what your client's goals are. This is a two-way conversation between you and your client. And the trick is narrowing down those goals to SMART goals. Now, way back in episode 55 of the podcast called Setting Goals for Your Design Business, I talked about SMART goals. In fact, I talked about smarter goals, but right now I'm talking about SMART goals. Now, in that episode, I was talking about goals for your business, but the same theory or process works with goals for your clients. You are trying to find SMART goals, goals that are specific, goals that are measurable, that are achievable, that are realistic or relevant, and trackable or time-related. And in order to get those SMART goals, you need to ask your client a lot of questions, and you need to listen closely to what they tell you. Because sometimes what the client says isn't really what they mean, and they might not even realize it. For example, they may think that the problem you're trying to solve is they need to generate more leads for their business, where in reality, what is really needed is a way to get better leads for their business, leads that convert into sales. And designing something to get more leads is completely different than designing something to get better leads. And you get those little differences, those minute details, by asking lots of questions. And during those questions, determining not only what your client says, but what your client needs, it could take the design that you end up creating in a whole different direction. And that's why your goal in defining your client's goals, those SMART goals, is to ask the right questions in order to get to the heart of the problem they hired you to solve. Now, speaking of questions, I put together a list of questions that you could use in your discovery process while talking to your clients. Now, it's a long list, and it's not something I wanted to go through in this podcast, but if you're interested, you can get it by visiting resourcefuldesigner.com/discovery, and you'll get a PDF of the questions. Now, this is not a comprehensive list of every question, but it's questions that I think are important and that you may want to consider when you are doing your discovery process with your client. Now, step number 2 of the discovery process is to study your client's competition. In order to find the solution to your client's problem, you'll need to know more about them, their industry, what they do, who they serve, how they go about doing it. And the best way to learn about the industry is to study their competition. Things to look for when studying the competition might be what makes your client different from the competition, what would make people choose your client over the competition, maybe what hurdles do customers face when they're dealing with that competition, hurdles that maybe your client could address and win clients their way. You might want to look to see how your client's pricing compares to their competition, and if that might have to be worked into the deal, or do you have to create a design that addresses that issue of why your client is more expensive than their competition? You might also want to look into what sort of marketing strategies or advertising campaigns is the competition using, and do you know if it's working for them? And finally, you should be looking to see what people are saying, both negatively and positively, about the competition. You can learn a lot from them, and it's great information to help your client. So studying the industry and the competition is a vital part of the discovery process. Now, the third step in the discovery process is auditing your client's marketing assets. Now, for existing clients, look at what they're currently doing to promote themselves or stuff they've done in the past, what's worked for them, what hasn't. Look at everything from their logo, their business cards, their flyers, their website, social media presence, their advertising, and everything else. If their website has analytics on it, be sure to study it to see how people interact with the site. What parts of it get more traffic? What parts get barely any traffic? Maybe they need to be updated, or maybe you can get rid of those parts altogether if they're not generating anything. Make the experience for the clients or for the customers as seamless and as easy as possible. Now, depending on how much you're charging for your discovery process, and yes, you should be charging for your discovery process. Remember, your clients are paying you for the entire package. They're not just paying you for the finished design you provide them at the end. So, depending on how much you're charging for your discovery process, You may even want to do an SEO analysis if it's a website that you're working on, or even if you're not working on a website, you may want to do an SEO analysis on both your client as well as their competitors. If there's a way for you to do it, there's lots of tools out there that allow you to do this. Look at the competitors' websites and see what sort of keywords that they're ranking for. Are there keywords the competition is ranking for that your client isn't even targeting that you can go after? Keyword research is a valuable tool and can go a long way into improving your client's visibility in search ranks. Now, by studying the various marketing assets that your client has, you should be able to spot their weaknesses and you should be able to spot their strengths. And all of that will help you set the path for your own project. Build upon their strengths and find ways to overcome their weaknesses. Now, that's good if your client is an existing business and already has stuff. But what if your client is a startup and they don't have any of this stuff? Then it's your job to talk to them and ask them what they were thinking of doing. Ask them what they like that other businesses are doing. Ask them what they don't like that other businesses are doing. You need to provide some ideas and some guidance for them. Especially if you've been doing this for a while, you may have ideas that they've never even thought of. That happened to me just today. A New York client, the client I mentioned at the beginning, one of the clients that I designed a logo for, they asked me to design a flyer for them. But the information they gave me wasn't really enough information to fit a trifold flyer. So I suggested to them, why don't we just do a two-sided rack card, which would work perfectly with the amount of information they gave me. And it's something they hadn't even thought of. They didn't even know I had to describe what a rack card was. And once I did, they go, oh, I've seen those before. What a great idea. I never would have thought of that. So use your knowledge and your experience to help your clients, especially the startups who aren't quite sure what they're doing. Now, I love helping startups because when you do, it's as if you're starting with a blank canvas and you know that everything that goes into it, everything you put into it will be done the right way. Now, the fourth step in the discovery process is to examine your clients from a customer's perspective. If you really want to understand your client and their brand, you need to experience from the perspective of their customers. Now, if you already are one of their customers, then great. You know firsthand what dealing with them is already like, so you can put that knowledge to good use. But if you're not already their customer, go through the experience. Go out and buy their product or their service as if you were a member of their target market. Of course, that's if it's affordable. I'm not telling you to go out and buy a car if your client is a car dealership. But if it's something like maybe a day spa, go get a massage or go get a haircut. Or if they're a store that sells products, go buy one of the products. Just see what the experience is buying and being a customer for your client. You can also ask your family and your friends for their opinions, just like you would with any other purchase. If you're going to buy something, sometimes you'll ask somebody, what do you think about this? Well, ask your friends, ask your family what they think about this client. Go online, read reviews. You can read Yelp reviews, you can read Google reviews. There's all sorts of places. Just do a search for them and see if there are any reviews out there and learn whatever you can, just like a real customer would. If you have the chance, go into their store if it's a brick and mortar store, or call their customer service or chat online if they have that option, and talk to the people that work for them. Ask questions about the product or the service, whatever it is. Ask them what the features are. Ask them what the cons are. Ask them what other customers have said about them or about their product or service. And even if it is something you can't afford, like buying a car or maybe going on a vacation if you're doing work for a travel agency or something, you can still go through the process without actually making a purchase. Go down to the auto dealer and look at cars, see how the salespeople come out and greet you. What sort of information do they give you? If you ask for a quote, do they just write it on a blank sheet of paper, or do they have a nice pad that they put everything, or do they email it to you electronically, or how does that all work? Go through the process, even if you don't plan on buying the car. By becoming a customer, you can fully see what it is that your client wants you to achieve because you will be experiencing it firsthand. And that experience will be very valuable to your design, as well as great information if you share it with your client. You can tell them that you went through the experience and this is what you felt. This is what you learned. And they will find that information very valuable. So those are 4 steps that I put together for creating a good discovery process. Now, Of course, every client and every design project you work on will require special steps in their discovery phase. I mean, some of the general questions that you would ask might not be required. You might already know the answer or it might be irrelevant. And then there's some cases where you might have to ask unique questions that you've never asked before that are specific to that one client or that one project. Only you will know how in depth you'll need to go. On some projects, discovery can take an hour or two, while on other projects, it could take weeks to learn everything you need before starting the actual design stage of the project. So even though I said these are the 4 steps involved in the discovery process, it's entirely up to you to see how far you take it or how little you use from this in creating your own process. Now, one thing I do want to touch on, though, is you can actually use the discovery process as a standalone project, a way to get your foot in the door, if you will. If this is a client that you're going to start working, maybe it's the very first project you're going to work on, and maybe you're going to design a website for them that's a $10,000 or a $15,000 or a $20,000 website. Well, they may be a bit hesitant about doing this work with you, paying you this when they don't know much about you. So offering the discovery process as a project on its own is a great way to break the ice. You go through all the same steps, but you do it as a standalone project. And if after all the questions and all the research and everything you've done and everything you present to them, if they're still not sure, then they can walk away and all they owe you is for that discovery process. They don't have to invest the $10,000, $15,000, or $20,000. And you can hand over that information, the stuff you've gathered, and they can take it and maybe do something with it themselves, or they can even pass it on to another designer if that's what they want to do. But the chances are, if you do your job right, they will see the value in sticking with you and they will decide to proceed with the project, especially if you do a stellar killer job with the discovery process and show them things that they hadn't even thought of. And if you can find solutions to their problems, or at least show them the direction that you're taking in order to solve those problems, there's a good chance they'll hire you anyway. Because remember, discovery, it's like dating. And your job is to give a good enough impression that you get asked out on a second date. Kind of corny, I know, but that's the way it works. So what does all this add up to? Well, when the time finally comes for you to start the design process, actually getting down to designing, you should not be asking yourself, will this design work? No, what you should be asking yourself is, do I have enough knowledge? Have I done enough research in order to know that this design will work? And if you did the discovery process well, if you did your research, if you found out everything you can, if you think you have a solution to the problem, then the answer to that question will be yes. And at that point, you're well on your way to creating a winning design for your clients. Now, I would love to know what your discovery process looks like. Head on over to resourcefuldesigner.com/episode 120 and leave a comment for me there telling me what you do in your discovery process. And don't forget to visit resourcefuldesigner.com/discovery if you want to get my list of questions that you can ask during your discovery process. And now it's time for this week's question of the week. This week's question comes in from Brianna. Brianna writes, is there an online course you'd recommend for best practices in developing, redesigning an existing WordPress site? All courses seem to assume you're building a whole new site from scratch. I can do that in my sleep, but more often than not, a designer is tasked with redesigning something that already exists. Navigating somebody else's code structure is a pain at the best, and I break out into a cold sweat whenever I'm tapped for something like this. I almost always outsource the development because I just don't know what those best practices are. Even though I have a very similar skill set to those I outsource to, I'd love to get a handle on this type of project, as I have a huge WordPress site redesign coming up over the summer and would much rather keep all the work in-house, so to speak. Well, thank you very much for the question, Brianna. And to tell you the way I do it, I do not take over other client sites. The only time I've ever taken over a client site is whenever I knew on the horizon they said like we're going to be doing a complete rebuild, and I've had to migrate their existing site over to me and maybe make a few minor changes to it while I was building their site. But I will never take on a project from a client where I'm just updating or making changes to an existing site. If I'm going to do that, I will start from scratch. And I will explain to my client that would be kind of like taking over somebody's recipe, like, handing me a bowl with a whole bunch of ingredients over in it and telling me to continue the recipe without giving me, or continue to make the dish without giving me the recipe, and me just having to throw other stuff into it. It doesn't work. It's possible to do it, and you might turn up with something good, but then you might not. There's a good chance you ruin things. And I try to explain it using something like that, some sort of story like that to my clients. And I tell them that it'll take me twice, 3, 4 times as long to do stuff to an existing site for the very reason you just said, going through the code or trying to figure out. Now, if it is WordPress, sometimes it's easier to figure it out, but depending on some themes, I've gone in and looked at some people that just asked me for a favor to look at their website. And I look at some of the themes out there, and I consider myself pretty proficient when it comes to WordPress. And some of the themes, I was just scratching my head on how do you do this? Or I didn't understand some things. So when it comes to that, I would always tell my client that if they want me to take over, I'm going to redesign, and they need me to redesign a website for them, because in the long run, it'll be cheaper that way. Because again, it'll take me 2, 3, 4 times as long, and I'm charging them for that time in order to work on their existing site. Where if I build a new site, then it'll be much quicker. And then for future updates, if they're going to stick with me, for future updates, it'll be a lot faster to do. So in the long run, they'll save money. So that's the way I do it. There's only a couple of times in the past, as I said, where I have taken on a client's website, but it was always with the anticipation that within the next year, I would be redesigning a website for them. So in that case, yeah, I'll take it on. And I tell them I will not do any major revisions. I will go in and, like sometimes it might be, it's summer months. Instead of opening till 5 on Fridays, they're closing at 4. So can you go change our hours? Well, that sort of stuff is easy, and I'll gladly go do that. But if they want an entire section added or something changed around, no, I tell them I won't touch it. And you've actually gone one step beyond, where you've actually you've hired a developer to do it, to go in. I don't even do that. I just tell them no. I says, if you want that, you can find other people to do it. It's just not worth my time. It's not worth the headache. So that might not be the answer you wanted, Brianna, but that's the way I work. And as I said, it's just not worth taking on somebody else's problems like that. So I avoided any chance I get. But thank you very much for the question. Now, if you would like your question answered in a future episode of the podcast, visit resourcefuldesigner.com/feedback and submit your question there. Now, I received another iTunes review this week, and I want to discuss this one a little bit. This one comes in from Brian from the USA, and it's a 4-star review, and it says, good advice from a mediocre designer. And actually, Brian, you made a mistake there. It says Medicare designer. I don't think that's what you meant. I think you meant to say mediocre. Might have just spell corrected there. But the review says, I think the content is good in the beginning. You can tell now Mark is running out of content and is not as insightful and helpful as in the beginning, which is to be expected for this type of content. I've been a part of the Facebook group he started. The designs are very amateur, so it is a good group if you are new or need guidance. But for someone who is more of a veteran and wants to be inspired by talented designers and artists, steer clear from that Facebook group. I've seen some of Mark's work. He is a mediocre designer. Can tell he started his design career from a different era. I respect that he has made a career doing his design. So to summarize, it's a good podcast for your business if you're starting out. Even occasional tips here and there if you've been running a design business. Therefore, to rate this podcast as a business podcast and not a design podcast, it's okay. Well, thank you for the review, Brian. I honestly do appreciate it. And you put some good criticisms in there. And just point out a few things. I do agree that maybe my content isn't as good as it was in the beginning. And not that I'm running thin, but some of the more important topics I did do earlier on. Now, that's not to say I still have a long list of stuff I'm going to talk about. And just like this one, discovery, this is one that I've had on my books for well over a year. I just never got around to doing it. So there's still some good stuff coming. Now, a few of the comments you said, the Facebook group, you're saying that there's the designs in there are very amateur. The Facebook group for Resourceful Designer is not meant to be a group showcasing design. It's a group for people running a design business to help each other out, to share advice, to seek advice with dealing with clients, with running their business. Yes, there are people that share designs in there, but every once in a while, if somebody needs to do that, it's fine. Now, I did crack down, and not because of your review, but I did recently just crack down on people that are just posting saying, here's something I did, and putting a link to Behance or something like that. Those ones, I'm not going to accept them anymore. I'm going to delete those posts. But if somebody is in the process of designing something and needs advice, I'll let them do that. But mostly the group is not meant as a showcase for designers. It's meant as a place for people running a design business to get information or to learn things in that sense. So to anybody who is running a graphic design business or is thinking of running a graphic design business, then the group is exactly what they need. But if you're just looking for designs to inspire you, then definitely my Facebook group is not what you're looking for. Now, you mentioned something here, and it's hard not to take it personally, but you say that you've seen some of my work and I'm a mediocre designer. I've only shared 3 things in the 2.5 years I've been doing this podcast. I've only shared 3 things in the Facebook group. And one of them was a logo I was doing for myself. So I don't know if you're judging on just those 3 things that I did, that you're saying I'm a mediocre designer, because I purposely do not share my work in there because I'm already putting myself out enough on the podcast. So I don't know where you saw my work, because I don't have a website with a portfolio for people to look at. I don't have a Behance page. So I don't know where you've seen my work, or are you just judging from the 3 things I've posted over the years in the Facebook group? And as for your last comment about you're rating this podcast as a business podcast and not a design podcast, it's a podcast about the business of design. That's what it is. I've never claimed this is a design podcast because I don't talk about design. I never, ever talk about design in this podcast. I'll talk about resources to help you with design, but I've never talked about design per se. I talk about running a design business. So you are exactly right in that last comment that this is a business podcast. It happens to be the business of running a graphic design business. But I do appreciate you putting this review in, because it does tell me that there are some people. If one person would leave a review like this, there must be other people thinking things like this as well. So I'm going to look through my list of topics and see if maybe I could come up with some better stuff, or look back at my earlier episodes and see what I was doing back then, and maybe try to get things back in line now. So I really thank you very much for the review. And I know you don't think very bad about the podcast. You gave it 4 out of 5 stars, which is still a really good review. So I really do appreciate the constructive criticism of this review. Thank you very much. Now, I would love getting more reviews from people. If you want to do so, you can visit resourcefuldesigner.com/iTunes, and we'll redirect you to the iTunes page where you can leave a review for the podcast. Now, don't forget to go check out the Resourceful Designer app, whether you're on Apple device or you're on an Android device. Just go to your app store and search for Resourceful Designer and download the app. And it makes a great way to tell all your friends and people who don't or aren't into podcasts or don't really care about listening to podcasts. It gives them a chance to experience Resourceful Designer without saying, well, I download this podcast app or whatever. So thank you. And before I go, I just want to thank Pamela, my newest Patreon supporter. She's at the studio owner level. And at that level, Pamela gets a 30-minute coaching call with me every month. And we just had our very first one this week. I think it went very well. I think Pamela thought it went very well as well. And I look forward to our next call next month to see what sort of progress she's made with her design business. So thank you, Pamela, and thank you to everybody else who's supporting Resourceful Designer on Patreon. Now, if you're not already a supporter and you would like to become one, for as little as $1 a month, you can support Resourceful Designer. Simply visit resourcefuldesigner.com/Patreon and submit your pledge. So that's it for this week. Thank you very much for tuning in. I do appreciate the time you spend with me. Whether this is your first episode or if you're a longtime listener, it means a lot. So until next time, I am Mark DeCote, wishing you all the best with your graphic design business, and as always, reminding you to stay creative.
Thanks for listening to the Resourceful Designer podcast at resourcefuldesigner.com.